confidentiality, possession, integrity, authenticity, availability, utility. More than just buzzwords, these concepts are the building blocks for CMIS495, information security. World-renowned professor and all-around good guy Tim Ch3 is ready to take you to the other side. So get ready, stand tall, square your shoulders, and open up the door.
Hello and welcome back to our wrap-up video for Chapter 3. I'm going to pick up where I left off, which was at this slide. We just finished talking about Canada as just one simple example of how everything is different around the world. So it doesn't matter what country we're talking about, everything's going to be different with regard to IT and with regard to information security in particular. Any company that does business on the internet, you're a global company. Even if you're not intending to be, you don't have to be a multinational corporation in order to be a global company doing business around the world. So the problem is how to familiarize yourself with international laws that apply for your industry, because they do change from country to country to country, and figuring out which ones apply, where the jurisdiction is something we're still trying to unravel today. So the number one problem is, of course, enforceability. How do you enforce your own laws when the packets are being transmitted through ISP connections in another country? Again, this is still something we're trying to unsnarl. I don't have any right or wrong answers for you other than it's something that you do have to deal with in this industry. Just as we saw last time that the European Union has really taken the lead on privacy regulation, similarly, they've attempted to come up with a set of international, or at least European, cybercrime laws and regulations. The problem is, while it's a good set of standards, there's no provision for enforcement. So without enforcement, adherence is going to be difficult. The World Trade Organization, on the other hand, the WTO, does have the ability to enforce. So they've taken steps to at least try to protect intellectual property rights, which of course helps to foster business and more specifically to foster foreign direct investment, FDI. Now the downside to this is while it does account for how to enforce their regulations on protecting intellectual property, they rely on the individual countries to enforce them. And so the WTO has no ability to enforce other than getting buy-in from all of the countries that are members. A recurring theme is the leadership of the European Union. So their directive in 1995 was to try to protect copyright, trademark, and privacy infringement. The United States followed suit, but 3 years later in 1998 to do the same thing. If that seemed like a short section on global regulation, it is. That's because there's not a lot yet. It's more about understanding the individual countries that you're doing business with, as opposed to any global level legislation. So we'll move on to the topic of professional ethics in information security. I hope you've gotten the impression throughout your coursework in CMIS in particular and the School of Business in general that ethics is a big deal. Certainly through the late 90s and early 2000s, we had a rash of unethical, unscrupulous behavior on the part of corporations. We don't want another generation of business people like that. We want a generation of business people that are seeking value for their customers and to be above board and show integrity and honesty and transparency. Now, for information security, this is an even bigger deal for a variety of reasons. We could talk about this in class, but in general, information security professionals are entrusted with a higher level of access in the organization than others. So that's one reason why it's even more important. It's also just a matter of trust, that IT security professionals are entrusted to take care of people And anything you do to violate that trust is bad, very bad. It's very, very bad. Is ethical behavior in IT security the same thing as in other professional disciplines? Yes and no. There is an expectation of ethical behavior, but whereas doctors and lawyers have specific codes where any unethical behavior will result in the loss of your license, there's no such licensure for IT, at least not yet. If I had to look in my crystal ball, I would say in the future we will have something like that. But right now we're limited to two areas for ethical guidance. One is your organization's code of conduct, and the other is your professional code of conduct, according to whatever professional organization you're a member of, whether that's AITP or ISACA or AIS, or I've got a list of professional organizations here in a minute. But in general, that's why we still refer to IT as an occupation as opposed to profession, although we're starting to think of it more and more as a profession with its own code of behavior. One way to ensure ethical behavior is to understand the difference between colored hats. So black hat hacking obviously is bad, illegal, unethical. White hat hacking, on the other hand, is when you're conducting penetration testing with authorization from the company that you're testing. The authorization piece being very, very key. So there is a gray area in between white and black called gray hat hacking, where you do penetration testing without authorization, but immediately after you find the vulnerability and exploit the vulnerability, you turn over the documentation to the company that was your target. But again, this is still illegal. So I encourage you to think of yourselves as white hat hackers from now on. Whether officially or unofficially, that's the right attitude to have in the business world. There is a certification for CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, that is also very popular in the InfoSec community. There's an interesting juxtaposition between ethics and cultural differences. So what you'll find is what's considered ethical in the United States is very different from what's considered ethical in other countries. So the most extreme example might be in Asian countries where there's more tolerance for software privacy, copying DVDs, copying movies, copying software. I even ran across an article, in fact, a student shared this with me, where network cards are being counterfeited. Now, you might wonder what that means to have a counterfeit network card, but part of it has to do with stealing intellectual property from other companies and possibly duplicating MAC addresses, which, of course, in CMIS495 we know is a very bad thing. But the softer side of ethical perspectives and cultural differences, I used the example of Germany last time and their view towards privacy, which is reflected in their legislation. But just because something is legal or illegal is not necessarily the same thing as being ethical or unethical. That's one of the big themes of this chapter. One of the most famous authors in the area of cultural differences is Geert Hofstede, and I hope I'm saying this right. He's Dutch. If you want to say Geert Hofstede, I've heard it pronounced that way too, but I think he says Geert. If you look at geerthofstede.com, and you can do country comparisons to see how different companies compare along his 6 dimensions of culture. Some fascinating stuff out there. It's probably out of scope for this class, but I wanted to introduce you to one very good resource that's freely available for you once you get out into the business community. So cultural differences can change people's views on what is considered ethical and what is not ethical. It also leads to differences in legislation in terms of what's legal and illegal. But culture drives both of these facets of human behavior. Table 3.2 has an interesting side-by-side comparison. So if you look at just the piracy rate in the U.S., 19%, it's probably low. But this is reported or trackable issues of piracy. But you scroll down to other countries, specifically in the Far East, 86% piracy rate in Indonesia, 77% in China. That's high. That's indicative of a different cultural point of view. Not that people in those countries are just evil. It's important to say that explicitly. We're not saying they're bad, we're not saying they're evil. They have a different view of what's right and wrong. And if I can just tack on one explanation for why their views of right and wrong differ is if you look at here Hofstede's page, and you'll see their level of collectivism versus individualism is very, very high. So that's the biggest area of difference in our cultures, where Asian cultures tend to value the needs of the group over the needs of the individual, thus justifying the behavior of copying software for your friends and family because you're doing the right thing according to them. But taking things back to the real world, at least in the U.S. context, in the workplace, how do you know what's ethical? Well, you have to refer to your ethical code of conduct for your organization. And we talked about enforcement, and remember the five steps that you need to do enforcement, not stapling the document to their forehead, but disseminating it and making sure that people read it, understand it, agree to it, and acknowledge that they agree to it, and then enforcing it fairly throughout the organization. Training is a big part of this. So there's a direct relationship between employee training and employee ethical behavior. So a lot of times people behave unethically because they don't know any better. And in fact, if I can fall back to my philosophical background, Socrates made a very famous statement that no man does evil knowingly. So the idea being that it's evil acts are usually done out of ignorance, not out of malicious intent, which is interesting to ponder. I did want to discuss in class what type of security training you think works for employees. Too often it's just publishing the policy and sending a link out to everybody. Companies that are a little more serious about security training will do videos and whatnot, but the best sort of training is really face-to-face and interactive, where people can ask questions. But recording a video is certainly cheap and efficient and somewhat effective. I'm curious if you work full-time somewhere and they have a pretty nifty way of doing security training with employees, please let me know what it is. I love to hear stories about how companies can be successful in their training efforts, because it is the cheapest and most effective thing we can do for information security. I also like hearing about people's experiences with malfeasance in the workplace and things that where people were deliberately trying to game the system or get around things, either whether it's end users being evil or system administrators being evil. We're evil all the time. I would love to hear your examples. Maybe we can get into this area in class one day. I have my own experiences with ethical dilemmas in the workplace, which I'll be happy to share with you in class sometime. Your textbook identifies three things that drive unethical and or illegal behavior in the workplace. One is ignorance. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that was the wrong thing to do. Number two is accidental behavior. Oops, I accidentally deleted that file. Number three is intentionally bad behavior. Somebody's intentionally trying to get away with something. And then I put in green beside the three words in red some examples that I think line up. So remember, every information system is made up of three areas of people, process, and technology. Ignorance, I think you can manage with your people controls, your personnel controls, which includes security training, of course. Accidental errors, you can typically fix with your process controls, documenting the workflow, the business process. And then the third one, when somebody's trying to get away with something, you can sometimes fix with technology controls in terms of limiting their access, limiting what they can get to, limiting their ability to install their own software, limiting their ability to access servers they don't need to get to, whether it's inside or outside the network. But deterrence is allegedly the best way for preventing illegal or unethical activity. So deterrence can take a variety of have a variety of methods. Deterrence theory says that laws and policies can only deter if three conditions are met. The first is fear of the penalty, two is probability of being caught, and three is the probability of the penalty being applied. So in order to have actual deterrence in the workplace, a little fear is probably a good thing, and making sure that people feel like they will probably be caught, and if they're caught, they're going to be punished. This is the essence of deterrence. So, for example, in order to deter cheating in the classroom, I try to give everybody a healthy dose of fear that you'll be not just fail a class, you could get kicked out of the school of business, kicked out of the university for cheating, including plagiarism. The probability of you being caught, pretty high. We've seen it all before, and every now and then somebody comes up with a new scheme for cheating, but it's just not worth it because the probability of the penalty being applied is 100%, either failing the class or worse. So deterrence in school is one thing, deterrence in the workplace is very similar. There are a variety of ways to deter, though. One story I'll share about deterrence in the workplace, you don't have to actually have a web content monitoring and logging system in place to put fear into your end users. There was one year, many years ago at Corning, we couldn't afford that kind of technology, but we told all employees that all web traffic was being actively monitored and logged. And so what ended up happening is people would self-report. And this is way back when I was on the help desk, they'd call me up and say, "Oh, I just want to let you know, I accidentally clicked on this link and it was a porn site, and I didn't mean to click it, and it wasn't, please don't, fire me or report it to HR. Just want to let you know what's going on." And so, okay, well, we'll let it go this time. Thank you for letting us know proactively. It's funny, but hey, sometimes it works. If you just tell people everything's being monitored, they will change their behavior, whether you're monitoring or not. Please remember that professional organizations do have a code of ethics. So, for example, if you're a member of AITP, there is an expectation that you're following the code of ethics for AITP, and it'd be a good idea to take a look at this, or any professional organization that you're a member of. I keep using AITP because we've got such an active student chapter on campus, but there are others. ACM is probably the oldest one. SANS is a great training organization, security specifically training organization. ISACA is probably the gold standard. ISSA, AITP, IEEE is more kind of computer engineering, computer science. AIS is more academic. InfraGard, I recommended that you join if you're going to be in the information security field. That's the partnership between the FBI and private industry. There's a large chapter in St. Louis. And of course, LinkedIn groups can be, each of these professional organizations has a LinkedIn group that you should join as well. And this is just another way of staying current on all of the threats that you need to be aware of in the current environment. So LinkedIn can be a fantastic resource. Well, here's a summary of the chapter. We've covered a lot of ground in chapter 3. I would just encourage you to ask questions. I know you have your exam Tuesday, and I'll get this published today on Sunday. So please let me know what questions you have, either email, text, call, come by my office. I'll be happy to talk about this stuff. It's fun to talk about. And of course, I love to hear your stories as well for just cool information security stuff that's going on in your life and your experience. That's what makes it fun to, that's what makes this class fun to teach, because everybody's got a story. So please feel like you're in the safe zone with me. You can share this stuff. We'll cover it in class some more. So without further ado, here's some wrap-up music.